I'm happy to introduce our speaker for the evening. Um, he's a wonderful guy, our very own Len Segel. Len's a member of our board, um, and certainly a distinguished member of the architecture community and a colleague of mine. He's a longtime resident of Boulder, and he kind of acts as our Boulder representative, I suppose, along with Bob. Um, and overall, Len has a real passion for specifically Boulder's modern history. And I'm looking forward to what he's going to share with us this evening. I know it's going to be a wonderful presentation. Um, so, with that, let's welcome our speaker, Len. And I think your talk titled Boulder Modern Architecture, a History.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It's so wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about one of the things I'm passionate about. My intention tonight is to give people an overview of the remarkable heritage of the modern movement in Boulder. And modernism is really an outgrowth of the spirit of this community, which has always been known as being a very progressive place from the start. And this initial screenshot shows amazing modern buildings, modern era buildings from different locations geographically in Colorado, Aspen, the Springs, Boulder, and Denver. And that's just meant to encapsulate the fact that there's a really rich heritage throughout the state of Colorado, and that we um, have people like me in different regions that know maybe a little bit too much about our area and want to share that information and kind of help others appreciate it. So, that being said, I'm going to give a little background about me so you can understand who am I and why the heck do I have any business talking about modernism. Um, I'm an architect. As Josh mentioned, I'm a colleague of his at Kephart, and we focus on residential architecture. And that's the end of my commercial about Kephart. I'm a longtime resident of Boulder. This is my own home. My wife and I have raised children here in this house that we remodeled in a historic district, and we've been here quite a while. I've also been, and it's a funny word, practicing. I've been practicing architecture, and the joke is one of these days I'll get it right. But these are some of the buildings that I had had a chance to have a design hand in over time. The image on the top is a building under construction right now, and the image below is and that's a senior living community. The image below is 20 years old, and that's an office building for a high-tech company in Longmont. And then before I came to Boulder, I had a chance to work in New York City for about 10 years, and I got to work for some people who were connected to the modern movement. So I worked for some of Marcel Breuer's partners. He was one of the Bauhaus teachers. I worked for Davis Brody. They came out of the Lucan School at more or less at Penn. And I worked for Richard Meyer. So those are some of the buildings that I'd had a chance to work on and rub elbows with people. Felt very fortunate about that. I also had a chance to teach at the University of Colorado, teach architecture studios. So that's been a joy in my life. Um, and now we're getting to the story about Boulder. And here we have an overview of this. You look at it from 4,000 feet in the air, and it looks kind of small. And here it is hard up against the mountains. And why is Boulder one of the most remarkable places in Colorado with regard to the modern movement of architecture? And that's my story tonight. Um, so we all know, there's certain icons of Boulder. There's the Pearl Street Mall, and the Flatirons, and they in themselves are part of the formula of what makes Boulder a great fertile ground for modernism. Um, Boulder Pearl Street Mall is unique because it's a social mixing place for people, and the Flatirons are amazingly dramatic, dynamic, and geometric. Um, it's an amazing backdrop. I'm going to give a little bit of brief history, really brief, about modernism and why it showed up in Boulder, and This first slide is really talking about what I believe is the birth of modernism um, in the United States, which was the Chicago fire in 1871. And coming out of that, Chicago was devastated and tried to figure out innovative ways to rebuild the city. And they came up with this steel frame architecture that was fire resistant and easy to build. And some of the first architects who mastered that vocabulary were in the top left. That's a building designed by Louis Sullivan and Dankmar Adler in downtown Chicago. It's still there today, and it's this amazing steel frame combination office and retail building. And then one of their employees was this guy named Frank Wright. You know him by Frank Lloyd Wright, but Frank was their draftsman, chief draftsman. And the image on the bottom right is one of his early houses in Chicago with an amazingly bold cantilever using steel again. The other great influencer to modernism was another cataclysm, and this one's the World War One, and Europe needed to rebuild. So in 1918, Europe was pretty devastated, and especially Germany. And sprouting up in Germany and other of the Central European and Western European nations was were schools that were like the Bauhaus in Germany, that were meshing art and culture and industry. And that influence spread to the United States, and it came to Boulder not long after 1918. So Boulder, why did it happen in Boulder? This is an image in the top left of the early days of Boulder, probably about 1880. That little building in the far distance is the old main building, the only single building on the university campus up on the hill. And the rest of those buildings are wood shacks, wood buildings downtown. And then so it was a clean slate. It was an opportunity for people to leave Chicago or leave the Midwest, leave New York, and come west and strike out and try new ideas out. And try they did. You can see here's examples of exploration that occurred for 50 years in Boulder, neoclassical and Victorian and arts and crafts and, all sorts of styles. And Boulder's always been an experimental place. And you can see that in the historic districts, and you can see it today. Um, the other ingredient about Boulder and about modernism is culture. And Boulder, because of the university, which has been very strong in bringing culture and an appreciation of culture and bringing people who are open-minded to the arts, Boulder flowered that way. And the image on the top left is the Chautauqua encampment. It truly was a bunch of tents with two permanent buildings, the amphitheater and the community house for lectures. And then the bottom left image is the Boulder Theater, but originally it was a vaudeville house. It didn't have an Art Deco facade, and that was put on in the 30s. So it was an older building. There was always art. That was a main ingredient. And as I mentioned, the university, which has been around since since Colorado became a state, 1876, has had, and you can see I've handpicked the more modern buildings on campus because there's also a rich history of the Neo-Italianate style, Tuscan vernacular. But the main thing is Boulder, the university has brought people like our board member, Bob Nauman, who are professors, who are highly educated, bringing intellectual know-how to the community and then spreading that out in every walk of life. And I've been fortunate to have a hand in 3 of these buildings that you see on the screen. So over the years, it's been really great to have a connection to the university. The second main ingredient to making Boulder a fertile ground for modernism and innovation is this whole background of the federal laboratories. And that's a picture of Dwight Eisenhower dedicating the National Institute of Standards, which is really a high technology research center. I mean, they do plasma physics research to this day. They did nuclear physics explorations there. The middle image on the right, of course, is the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and the bottom image is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And as you can see, all of those labs clothe themselves in the vision of modernism, which is innovation, and the language of that was like a billboard on the exterior of the building using almost industrial materials married with some of the local stone. The third aspect that made Boulder so rich for modernism was the private sector. The top right image is IBM. It was a huge impact for Boulder to bring high technology computerization to our community. The bottom right image is the Ball Aerospace Company, and if you think about it, the Ball Corporation started out as a glass canning company from Indiana, and they had a son that decided that he wanted to go off and do something different than can grandma's, tomatoes. And so he developed this space exploration wing, which is huge now. And then the bottom left image is storage tech, which wa- was hugely important in the 70s and 80s in bringing people to the Highway 36 corridor. So I'm going to focus tonight on these six gentlemen, and it's really the lineage of modernism. You've got Glenn Huntington, first generation, second generation James Hunter, and the third generation are Papa Cristo, Wagner, Easton, and Hartling. There will be time at the end of this presentation for questions and answers and comments, and I'm looking forward to that. But starting out, Glenn Huntington is is really Boulder's very first architect. He was the son of an architect, another Glenn Huntington, in who practiced in Denver. And the son came to Boulder, and 100 years ago, he was designing Frank Lloyd Wright influenced houses in town. And then he started doing more traditional homes for a period of time, including many homes for faculty members on University Hill in kind of the university vernacular. But in the 30s, he started to break out into doing Art Nouveau, Art Deco, Art Moderne style buildings. And that's partly because a young architect came into his firm named James Hunter, and I'll get to him in a minute. But these are the buildings that they created, and they were modern in, for instance, this building used recycled stone from old mines that were that were discontinued. The old gold and silver mines were shut down, and during the Depression, there were a lot of masons out of work, and they built this beautiful building out of this native sandstone. A couple years later, Boulder decided to build its a big high school after their central school downtown got too small. And Huntington's firm designed this as well in that Art Deco, Art Moderne style. One of the architects working on it was a man named Victor Hornbein, who went on to do some amazing architecture in Denver. Uh, a year later, they designed the bandshell in Central Park, and here you see some early images of a band, playing, and then you've got some present day rock and roll bands playing, and the junior ballet is performing, and it has this bravado of pure geometry that a lot of modern movement buildings use to express kind of and celebrate. Um, it almost is like showing it's an amplifier. It functions as an amplifier of sound, and it's visually an amplifier of culture. Another project, and the last one I'm going to show of the Huntington firm, is something that I think they self-developed. It's called the Huntington Arms Apartments. It's on University Hill. It's built out of concrete block. It has rooftop terraces. It's flat roofed. It's got huge windows for the stairwells inside, and pretty large, very large windows for the apartments themselves. And It's just an elegant building, even though it's done in industrial, affordable materials that have been really durable. It's a glazed concrete block. So as I mentioned, there was this guy named James Hunter, and look, from this photo, you almost want to say, "Look into my eyes. I'm going to hypnotize you, and you're going to believe in modernism." And he was this charismatic guy. And what was amazing about him is that he created this culture in his office that was almost like a school, where there were many architects working that were really strong designers, and he humored them, he encouraged them, and they became the third generation of architects, but they all had a hand in these incredible projects. He took over Huntington's practice. Huntington retired from his own practice and moved to Denver, and I believe he worked in the city's offices, city architecture offices or planning offices. Hunter took it over after coming back from serving in World War II. He designed homes like this one in the top right for a college professor, and he designed public buildings like the Boulder Public Library below. He also designed Boulder's skyscraper downtown. This was the Colorado Insurance headquarters. It's in the idiom that Mies van der Rohe, one of the leaders of the Bauhaus school, developed in his architecture. And it's a very rhythmical expression. There's an amazing subtlety about that big brick wall that if you look at it in the right angle, there's some beautiful brick patterns in there that are rhythmic and joyous. There's a rooftop deck. There was actually a heliport on the top, so it was a very modern idea of a building. And there was it was a mixed use, so there was a a department store on the first couple floors. He also designed these two buildings, which bookend Broadway and downtown. On the south side of downtown is the municipal building on the top left here, very much derivative of the French architect Le Corbusier, like a dormitory that he designed in Paris. And then the bottom right image is the Masonic Temple, which has been converted to the new Museum of Boulder. He also designed homes. Another home, here's the Nelson home. I believe he was a college professor. So again, the university spread the religion of progressive ideas and innovation out. And you could see it even in this living room. There's an upward sloping roof. There's acoustic tile in the ceiling, which was such a, 50s thing. There's clear story windows to bring just a glaze of daylight to that ceiling and bounce down into the main room. Um, the next generation, and I'll show four architects here, starts off with this man named Titian Papachristou. And I could go on for quite a long time about him because I worked for Titian Papachristou in New York City. He uh, had been a partner with Mercer Breuer, and I had the good fortune of working with him. And then once I came to Boulder, I got to share stories about Boulder and the early days of modernism. And he had really sweet recollections about working in James Hunter's office. He taught at the university, and then he went off on his own, designing apartment buildings like this. And then this remarkable assemblage of two houses for college professors. Um, the Jesser House in the foreground, this round building here, and then the Sirotkin House up the hill behind it. Just very inventive, very playful, used concrete block and just really inexpensive wood. It's a little hard to see, but this is a floor plan of those two buildings. So you can see a lot of cylinders and circles in the bottom building. The top building, the Sirotkin building, is more of a long rectangular building, but it still has some arcing forms of retaining walls, and you can see that in the image to the right. In the bottom left image, you can see this super cool living room with this hovering fireplace, a sunken fireplace with a flue that goes up through a skylight. So you've got earth and fire and sky all connected in this great theme here. The next house that I'm featuring here of Titian Papachristos was for the Sampson family. It was pretty derivative of a Frank Lloyd Wright experimental house that he designed and had built at the Museum of Modern Art in their sculpture garden in the 1950s. And Titian was working in New York in the 50s, so I'm sure he saw it. This is even better than that Frank Lloyd Wright house because the interior is to die for. And I'm sad to say that some very good intentioned people have bought the house. They're restoring the exterior, but they're renovating, and that's a dangerous word. They're renovating the interior, and I'm anxious to see how much has changed and how much they're going to preserve. Um, Hopefully, it's just an update and not a gut job. The next architect that I want to feature is Hobart Wagner. He was a graduate in the University of Michigan. He worked for Pietro Beluschi, who was part of the whole Boston academia world, MIT and Harvard. And this was Hobie Wagner's own office building that he built in Boulder. And it's this uh, beautiful Mondrian-esque type hovering uh, lighter than air building that floated above a pond that he had as detention on the site. Just incredible. Unfortunately, it's been so grossly remodeled that you wouldn't recognize it today. And that's part of what we're trying to do is educate people about modernism and documenting it and making sure that people understand it for future generations. Um, Hobart Wagner's firm also designed these two office buildings. The top left is that Ball Brothers building. And so you've got the main office building, and then you have these outbuildings with butterfly roofs. They're called butterfly because there's all like wings that are flapping in the air. And then the bottom right was a bank headquarters right on Canyon and Broadway, and it's been completely uh, refaced, remodeled. You'd never know it was here, but it had these incredibly light concrete shell arcing forms that were the bank drive-up teller spaces. Just an incredible building. Um, then he loved to experiment with roof shapes. And they were ways to bring daylight in um, for passive solar and to be expressive. And so the building on the top right is the coolest A-frame building that I might have ever seen. You might have ever seen, and it still exists. It's a church on near the university. Um, the building in the top left is a professor's home that has been remodeled and added on to with a very sensitive addition. And then the building below has been completely torn down. This was an addition to Casey School, and they tore it down to build an even bigger addition to the school. But this kind of roof sawtooth lighting to bring light from the north, the cool light of Colorado, into the classrooms is just unbelievably cool. Um, he also designed these two buildings, and the one on the top left is a bank, and so he designed several savings and loans banks. And this one is really an abstraction of the pyramid on the dollar bill. Because if you look at the pyramid on the dollar bill and you see the eyeball, which is a symbol of the Masonic, order, and you look at this building, it's a squashed down pyramid with the eyeball skylight on the top of the building. So it's a symbol of a monetary system, capitalism, God bless America, salute the flag. And the bottom image is of an addition to one of the oldest churches in town. And we'd be hard pressed to do an addition that this modern, but still contextual to this existing building. He wrapped the lower floor level with the same stone as the main building. He had flattened arches along the ground like the main arch. And then he had these gable roofs that mimic the main gable roof form. And then you can see the inside is this explosion of space and color for the sanctuary. And again, he just used concrete. It was, that one of those materials that modernism said we can use inexpensive materials, but in very expressive ways. Who says modernism doesn't have character and detail? The third architect I wanted to feature is Roger Easton, who sadly just passed away this year. He lived a good long life. We thank him for his amazing contributions. This is a really interesting apartment building in Boulder. It's held up really well. It has a complicated floor plan because it's like a split level, and it has rooftop uh, terraces, and then it has this connection from one building to the other that you can cross and have community up there. The next building is something that he designed. It's an office building that it could have come straight off the Illinois Institute of Technology campus that Mies van der Rohe designed. Literally, it's that solid brick, but very lightweight panels with corners of glass that dematerialize the mass. And in fact, the corners are these highly detailed steel columns, which was part of Mies van der Rohe's way to do ornament, but in an industrial sensibility. So it's just a beautiful building. It's been remodeled, um, and they did a nice job in the renovation. This is his pièce de résistance. This was Roger Easton's own office building. And if you know Mies van der Rohe's work and you think about the Farnsworth house that levitates above the ground, this is another one of those pavilion type buildings that not only feels like it's floating above the ground, but the roof feels like it's floating above the building itself. It's just a delightful building. And it's a dentist's office. So it's a good place if you have to go to get your teeth done, just, it takes the pain out of it, right? Um, the fourth architect I want to feature today, I'm calling the genius of modernism. He's the son of modernism, but Charles Hartling really is the Frank Lloyd Wright, the most inventive architect of Boulder, and I challenge maybe the most creative architect who's ever lived in Colorado. Every single project that he designed, he never repeated himself, other than saying, I'm going to try for something new and different and innovative and use different materials. This is a house. This is a house that's basically made of four cylindrical pylons that you can occupy. Sometimes they're a stair, sometimes they're a study, sometimes they're stacked bathrooms, and they're made out of concrete block. And then you have these saddlebags that come off the side that have metal siding. Just incredible, a house perched up on Flagstaff. Um, Probably 10 years earlier, he designed this house, more of a Frank Lloyd Wright style. It's on another impossibly steep slope. And so he spread the house out in a very long linear way. And he had this outdoor sidewalk that the little kiddos could ride their tricycles on because it was the only flat area on the site, was to go parallel to the flow of the slope. And then this incredible bay window in the living room. This is the second owner, um, standing proudly in his with his you know chair that he would perch in and look out on the from this window. And it has Frank Lloyd Wright and maybe a little Bruce Goff influence. Bruce Goff and Frank Lloyd Wright both were in Boulder during their lifetimes and gave lectures at the college. So it's possible that Hartling heard both of them. This is another house. This was featured in Life magazine, a popular magazine in the for 50 years. And just an incredible circular home with a prow. That's the living room on the top floor. And that living room is that bottom right image. It's one of my favorite rooms that I've ever been in any piece of architecture. It's anchored by this kind of free flowing um, uh, fireplace, but then the ceiling actually is a reverse dome. So it compresses you down and then it soars up at the windows. So there's this amazing sense of intimacy in the middle of the room. And as you move toward the glass, it explodes in volume. It's just incredible. This house is bizarro. It's just plain bizarro. It could have been designed in the year 2080. It is so futuristic. It was done in it was used in the film Sleeper. It's like a cross between, it's been described as barnacles, it's been described as the ventricles of a heart because the owner was a heart surgeon. It's also been described as the mushroom house. It's it's sprayed on concrete over a steel mesh frame. Just really innovative techniques of building it, and it's holding up amazingly well. Another house that looks like it could have come out of the case study houses in California is this one for merchants. They owned a department store in Boulder. It just cantilevers like it's a UFO that landed on the hillside there. I'm going to try to keep speed up a little bit, but this is the next to the last Hartling image. This could have come directly off of, to me, to Mies van der Rohe's drawing board. It looks kind of like the brick country house that he never built, but it was a famous house that architects studied in college, and it's being remodeled right now, as is the two of the other Hartling houses that we have here have seen. So it'll be interesting to see how a 21st century sensibility matches up with this architecture. And then I put this one in because we did a tour very early pre-COVID days in 2020 with some of the Docomomo people, including Josh and Charles. And this is a house that looks like it's, a shell form or a C form, and it's made out of poured concrete, cast in place, and then this incredible roof form. So he's just, one of my heroes of all time. You can't say, you can't not say something about NCAR, though, when you talk about modernism in Boulder. And the National Center for Atmospheric Research, I'm calling our palace of modernism. It sits up like a palace on the mesa, designed by I.M. Pei, and you see him over here with Walter Orr Roberts. And Walter Orr Roberts was the director of NCAR. He also hired Tish and Papachristo to design his home. And then Tish and Papachristo met I.M. Pei, and there's a long, involved story there. But needless to say, it's just an incredible setting for science and for society and for architects and anybody who wants to go and explore that incredible, unusual setting that we have on the mesa there. So where does this going? Well, modernism to me is not a style. It's an attitude about innovation. And this attitude that these six architects created in Boulder lives on. And here are some of the firms that I'm just going to briefly feature in work that has been done at the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century and into the 21st century. And Harvey is here, Harvey Hine from HMH, and Jim Bershoff is here from Oz. And so I'm just going to kind of go through these and just, you can look at these and you can see how these reference modernism and Boulder modernism. Some of these are homes, some of these are office buildings, and the spirit lives on of innovation. And I want to say that that spirit of innovation, I think, feeds the population of Boulder to be even more fertile ground for progressive ideas. So if you think Boulder is left of center, it's in part because the architects here have been bringing attitudes about progressive ideas to solve housing issues, to bring affordable materials in use. And um, that's my talk, to give you an overview. I look forward to questions and comments, and having the opportunity to drill down at a future time to talk about some of these architects in a little bit more detail that I've highlighted tonight. Thank you. Questions, comments?
Hey, Len, could you take us through that last two slides that you showed and point out who the architects were for each of them?
Okay, so top left, this is HMH Architecture led by Harvey Hine. That's a house. And interestingly, that was a house for Richard Jesser and his wife, Jane. And he had hired Tish and Papachristo in the 50s to design his house. And I showed that house earlier. The image on the right is it's Tom Pfeiffer. He was an architect I worked with in New York City. He was a partner of Richard Meyer. And it's a glass house with a Corten steel buried in the ground, Corten steel fronted parking garage. The image on the left is, I believe, studio architecture, and that's an office building. Top left, this is a house by Arc 11. The right, I'm not sure who the architect is on that one. And hang on one second. I need to go back. So let's see. This one is studio architecture, the bottom one, and I'm sorry. And this one is surround architecture. So if I have that wrong, please correct me. The top left is the Boulder Community Hospital, and that's an Oz architecture design. Um, I'm not sure. I've lost who the top right is, and Ross Shepard designed this fire department training center building. Does that help, Chris? Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I think that top right is maybe Arc 11, but it sure looks like a house, but it's a view I have not seen before from our marketing.
Yeah, that's definitely. And Kimball's with Arc 11, and
I wanted to mention, Lem, you were talking about the Boulder County Courthouse, which burned down in the a couple years before the new Art Moderne or Art Deco building was constructed. But somewhere in my recollection, I remember reading that all of the stone from that building was actually, as you said, recycled, but I think it was from all the bridge abutments for all the narrow gauge railroads that went up through Boulder Canyon, which I think is fascinating. That you would build a building of this size with completely recycled stone. They did know how to do things with frugality and yet elegance.
Len, do you know, have any of these buildings been landmarked? Do we know if there's some that could be in danger, or are there people that are willing to landmark their properties, or what is the situation for most of these looking like for that?
that's a good question. And I'd say like a building like this is landmarked. And but there's I'm going to bring up this one. This one. This is the um, Midland Savings Bank building, and Historic Boulder has proposed to landmark this building, and it got tabled by the city for several years because the city was interested actually in tearing it down and redeveloping the whole site with much bigger buildings. It's being called back now for the possibility of it getting landmarked. So there's hope for it to be landmarked, but it would be repurposed. And one of the ideas of repurposing it is to turn it into community, maybe an indoor farmers market for the winter months or a community event center. Um, but I certainly would look to. We have members of Boulder's Landmarks Board on this call and Historic Boulder, and if they wanted to jump in and talk about the issues of landmarking, for instance, I don't think there's any Heartling buildings that are landmarked, but they've been given a special designation called a structure of merit. Generally against the owner's wishes. It doesn't give them protection, but it gives them some accolade so that new owners who are looking at these buildings would recognize that there's something special about them. But it's still an uphill battle, even in Boulder, to try to get these modern era buildings landmarked, particularly, well, period. So.
I mean, I know there was a structure that was for sale this year that they completely got rid of all of the original cedar siding, put on hardy board siding, and painted the whole thing white. That was a Heartling, and that's the reason I ask questions like that, is just because unfortunately some of them have met not as good of a fate.
Right. So, and for instance, jumping around here, this building right here, as nice as it is on the site of this super cool circular bank that was it was the Everett Zegel, which is a precursor to Oz architecture, designed that bank, and it's gone. And so it just points out that sometimes there's nothing we can do because the highest and best use of a site may not allow the preservation, but the documentation and telling the story is really important. And that's why an organization like Docomomo has sprung up to fill in the gap when we lose buildings that are noteworthy.
Len, this is Jim. The Hobart Wagner Bank that you showed, he did a lot of those for the same savings and loan company.
Yeah.
And like I live in East Denver and there's one on like Colfax and Cremeria, although now it's a school because the bank
Yeah.
moved out.
He did some in Loveland, in Fort Collins, in Longmont, all the way up and down the Front Range. It was that big time in the 60s when the savings and loan movement was really big and strong and was kind of the backbone. In a way, it's a social statement of America in the middle part of the century when mom and pop businesses needed loans and they went to the savings and loans to get them.
Lan, I have a question. I haven't been in that building in years. Is it still got the kind of rat's maze or mice's maze of office within it, or did they rebuild? Because I was in that building many years ago when the atrium was still there, and it was absolutely a gorgeous space, really beautiful space. And just from the height and the volume and the light pouring in from above was quite nice.
Yeah. So uh, the building has not been gutted. It's still the rat maze of the remodel that the city of Boulder put in to create office space for their planning department and other departments. So it has not been refreshed or restored back to its original. And I'm not sure how much of the original fabric is left, but there were some cool details from the 60s of that bank. But that I don't know.
Len, it's Julian here. Does Docomomo have any procedures for how to document projects yet? Because we're working with Kimball's office and EJ Mead on the Mankick house that you were showing, the Hartling one, and doing a major remodel. And we did this Matterport survey, which is a point cloud survey that also has 3D images, and it was absolutely fantastic way of dimensionally documenting the whole project. So for a few $1,000s, it's amazing what you can get into a digital record.
So Julian is a principal at Studio NYL, which is one of the most sophisticated structural engineering companies in the country, and we're lucky to have them in Boulder. And I did talk with EJ Mead of Arc 11, and he offered to provide Docomomo an archival set of the original drawings for that building. I believe Arc 11's also remodeling the Con building, which is this one. And I believe Arc 11's remodeling the Willard house. So the long answer is yes, we do have policies and plans in place. Our Colorado community hasn't done it, but we have the intellectual capacity to tap into our resources from other communities like New York and help us to figure out how to do the documentation. So we'll connect with you, Julian, and Arc 11 on that. Thank you.
Leonard, this is Harvey. I think I'm remodeling the Willard house.
Oh, yay!
I hope you're wrong.
Well,
To
good.
you,
We have done a scheme on it, Harvey, but I'm sure it may have moved on. But um, uh, but these things fall on the shelf, and then you don't know whether you still have the project or whether it's somebody else's. I'll let EK know.
I nearly bought that house in 1988 for $210,000, and my wife convinced me not to.
Fair.
But I'm remodeling 2 Heartling houses right now, and it's a tough situation. It's really difficult as to what one should do, what one can do, what one needs to do, because the city has so many requirements about fireproof materials now. It's a very difficult proposition.
The house that I've always called the house that goes into the rock is one that I think remains pretty true to the vision of the place, and I think everyone will be satisfied with it. But I am absolutely stunned at what the team has done there in terms of documentation and trying to stay true to uh, the historic fabric of that property while integrating 21st century technologies in terms of window glazing systems and insulation and so forth. So I look forward, Len, to having one of the project architects share with you some of that information as it gets closer to being completed. I think there's a wealth of information there, and some of which, as Julian mentioned, these 3D uh, uh, LiDAR sort of investigations of old buildings are absolutely valuable as you look at historic buildings.
Well, we love to get a tour of it when it's open, so post-COVID tour.
Yes. Yes.
Well, as I see we're coming up on time.
I have a question, Josh. Um, and this is a naive question, I'm sure, for most of the architects. I'm a landscape architect, but Len, how would you characterize Cab Childress's work, and does he have any work in Boulder?
I had the good fortune of working with Cab on. I'll show you the project. It's way at the beginning. It's a university building. So Cab used to be on the design review board of the university, and I was the project architect for this building, the Atlas Center, and I got to visit with Cab. I would consider his work postmodern, in that it has modern sensibilities, but he brings in, particularly the work he did at the DU campus, many aspects of romantic historicism.
Yeah.
And um, to my knowledge, I think there's one building in Boulder that he designed. It's a bank building on Canyon, just east of that Midland Savings Bank. Was that torn down? Is that still there?
I don't know.
He did do the Black Box Theater adjacent
right.
to
That's what I
here,
was.
which is one of the favorite buildings by Childress. Yeah, right. Very good project.
Yeah, I agree with postmodern though as the definition of what he was doing, particularly with that theater.
Len, this is Harvey. I just wanted to comment since the Bill Mucho's engineering center is visible here. Bill, I used to work for Bill, and he told me the story that when this building was built, somebody very important came to him and said, "When are you going to finish the building and cover all the concrete?" So
I will. It's interesting to note that of all the buildings on CU's campus, I believe that is the only one that has ever received international notoriety in architectural press and in the journals. I think it is the only campus building, interestingly.
Well, I thank you. I know we need to wrap up, but I'm delighted, and I should have put my email address up there. I'll just tell you it. So if you want to write it down and contact me, it's LENS as in Len. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm just going to put it in the chat. And if you want to contact me to continue this conversation, I'm happy to do that. And I'm looking forward to maybe convincing some of you to join our organization. It's a fun group, and it gives us some more really good people to have connected to this organization throughout the state, and with your knowledge and expertise. So thank you for joining us tonight. And happy holidays if I to all of you. Happy and
Thank
safe.
you, Len. Great presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. It was fantastic.
Hey, job, Len. To hang out after the call here. If I can hear a motion to adjourn. Someone, come on.
I move.
Can I hear a second?
I can second for you.
All in favor? Do it. Thank you. Like I said, you're welcome. I mean, we have the airtime here, so you're welcome to chat. We were going to try to do a breakout feature this evening to break into more manageable groups so there aren't monopolies of the conversation, but we weren't able to figure that out. So for next time. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.